Howdy! In this video, you'll learn how to use Front's powerful connector system to set up refunds through the Stripe API. Front teammates will be able to easily process refunds by viewing a list of customer payments and selecting how much to refund. Best of all, you won't need to write a single line of code. Are you ready to get started? Let's get connected. Let's start off by creating a developer app. In your Front settings, go to Company, then click Developers. Select to create a new app. Name your app something descriptive. Here we've chosen to go with Stripe connectors, since this app will house Stripe app requests. We also recommend you upload a logo to help identify what service the connectors are used for. Don't forget to click Save down below. The next step is to set up a server, which is basically the API we want this app to connect to. Since we're building functionality with Stripe, we'll type in https://api.stripe.com as the domain, which we identified by reading the Stripe developer docs. We'll choose bearer as the authentication method, and after we hit create, we will go back into our server and input our Stripe API key. You can find this key in your Stripe dashboard. Consult the Stripe developer docs for more help identifying which key to use. Once you've set up a server to connect to the Stripe API, switch over to the Features tab. Here, we'll add a new feature. Since we're setting up an API request, we will select to add an app request connector. Let's call our app request List All Customers to match the name of the Stripe API endpoint. In the Flow Builder, we can skip over the input node because this API request will not need input parameters. Click straight into the Send Request node to configure the API call. By consulting the Stripe API docs, we know that this is a GET request to the V1 customer's endpoint. Click Run Test to see customer data from your Stripe account. When we expand the data array, we see that it contains the customers from our Stripe sandbox. This is exactly what we're looking for. Click the data array to extract it as a property, giving it an appropriate name such as customer list. This list will be made available as a dynamic variable for use in other parts of Front. Click Done to return to the Flow Builder. To finish off this app request, click the Return Data node to configure the data that will be passed to other parts of Front when this request executes. We select an object list so that the customer list that we extracted will be made available to teammates for selection. We then click the handy-dandy autofill button to populate available fields. We don't need all of them, so let's trim it down to just the customer name, email, and ID. You can keep whichever you find useful, but always select the ID so that it can be used by API calls to identify the customers after a teammate has made a selection. Just a little more trimming here. Once you've trimmed the list down, click Preview and then View List to see the fields that return for your customer data. These look like our legendary Twin Peaks characters, so we're good to click Done on this node and then save the app request. We now have a way to pull our list of customers directly into Front without any code involved. The next step is to create an app request that pulls up all the charges for a customer so that Front teammates can select which charge to refund from that list. As before, add a new app request feature to your app, calling it List Charges or something similar. This time, click the Input node because we will be supplying the customer ID to the request so that it only pulls charges for the given customer. You will need a real customer ID to test with, which you can get from the response returned by the previous List All Customers app request. Next, configure the Send Request node according to Stripe's API docs. Their List All Charges API endpoint is a GET request located at v1/charges. You can supply a customer query string parameter as shown here with a question mark followed by the word customer, then an equals sign followed by the customer ID input. This will filter the charges to the specified customer. When you run your test, you will see the charges for the customer. Expand the response properties as before to view details. Looks like they've been spending good money. These charges are what we'd expect to see. Similarly to the last request, select the data array to extract the charges as a dynamic variable, naming it something that makes sense to you. Click Done and then open the Return Data node to configure an object list output as we did before. Name the output something that will make sense to your teammates and select the customer charges variable you created. Presto! Then use the handy-dandy autofill button to list all the charge fields. Pare down the fields that you don't need, remembering to keep the ID field since it is necessary for use in downstream app requests and API calls. The fields that you keep will be available for use in other app requests, rules, macros, chatbots, and other front workflows, so choose what you keep based on your use case. For this example, we'll do some decent trimming, but in real-world use cases, you'll likely decide to keep more properties for downstream use. When you're done selecting the fields, you can preview them below, or simply click Done and Save to finish this app request. Now we're ready to create the final app request, which is the one that actually completes the refund. Add a new app request feature to your app, and name it something related to creating refunds. If you consult the Stripe API docs, you'll note that the Refunds API allows you to specify an amount, in cents, to refund and which charge the refund applies to. This means we can create two inputs, one for the amount you want to refund and one for the charge that the refund should apply to. You can get a charge ID from the List All Charges API response, but note that the app request we are building in this step will actually process a refund to that charge, so it's best to test a charge created by a test credit card in a sandbox environment. Unlike the others, this request uses a post method, which is usually used for creating new resources in an API. Select the Stripe server and add two query string parameters to the end of the refunds URL, one for amount and one for charge. The query string parameters are separated by ampersand as shown in the video. Make sure to add the input variables to the URL as well. It's true, the full URL is a little longer for this one, but you'll have it working in no time. Test your request to see the API response that returns when you create a refund. Remember, this refund actually executed on the specified charge, so test carefully. You'll notice a status is returned. Let's extract this property as a dynamic variable. It will be useful later to return a confirmation message to front teammates that the refund processed as expected. Type in a suitable label name. Select the status variable. Preview the output, and voila, you've completed the final app request needed for our workflow. Click Done and Save. You can pat yourself on the back, the developer app is ready. Now it's time to leverage the beautiful connectors you've built within a macro. Select the workspace you want the macro to apply to. Keeping in mind, you can also select the macro option within the Company tab to have it apply across all workspaces. Whichever route you choose, find the Macros tab and click to create a new macro. Choose to create a macro from scratch. Once in your macro, click the Settings tab to give it a name. Remember, this name and description is what your colleagues will see in the macro selection box, so make it clear and descriptive. You can also limit the macro to specific inboxes or teammates, but we're keeping it open in our example. Once you've set up the basics, the first step is to add a teammate input capture node. Click the plus button to find this option. This node allows your macro to gather inputs from the front teammates executing the workflow. We'll add a prompt so that teammates can select which customer to refund. Set the prompt type to drop down and choose for it to be powered by a connector. Find the connector you built for listing all Stripe customers. In the options list, select your customer list, and then choose how the customer properties should display to your colleagues for selection. In our case, we will opt to present the customer name and email to make it easy to identify them. Remember, you can add more output properties in your connector if you need additional specificity. Click Done to finish with this step and return to the macro builder. Now let's add another teammate input capture step after the first one so that your colleagues can choose which charge the refund should apply to and how much of a refund to provide the customer. The charge selection is also powered by one of your connectors, because the values are dynamically returned from the Stripe API, so select the same drop-down type and find the connector you set up for listing all charges. The customer ID will come from the previous teammate answer node, so click the plus sign to create a new dynamic variable. The variable should look at the teammate answer you created and extract the ID property from it. Name this variable the customer ID or something similar. Click Save, then make sure to add this variable to the input field. Now let's configure how the charges display to your colleagues. Select the list of charges and then present the options. It's a good idea to specify the units that the API returns values in. For example, Stripe returns values in cents, which may not be obvious to most people. Add in whatever other charge properties you think will help your colleagues select the correct payment to refund, and then click Done. Now let's add a prompt for specifying how much to refund. This property comes straight from the teammate executing the macro, so it can be configured as a simple number prompt. Remember to help your colleagues out by specifying the units when it's otherwise unclear. Click Done to return to the macro builder. Now for the final step. Create a new dynamic variable to represent the charge ID. You will need this to power the Create a Refund connector. Select the teammate answer for which payment to refund, and then add a step for extracting the ID. Name this variable the charge ID to help keep things sorted. Save your dynamic variable, and then click to add another one. This is where we will execute the refund connector. It's a bit buried in the variable system, we know, but a future version of Front will allow you to drop in app requests as top-level nodes. For now, search for your Create a Refund app request in the variable menu. Once selected, fill out the inputs with the applicable variables that you got from the teammate answers. Then add a step to extract the refund status from the result of the app request. As always, give it a good name. This will help you in the future whenever you edit your macro. Click Save and Done, and then find the Apply Actions node in the macro. Let's add a comment to teammates here that lets them know that the app request executed and the refund was processed, with whatever state comes back from the API. Note that it's important that the Apply Actions node include an output variable from the Refund a Charge connector, because otherwise the request to refund the payment will not execute. Save your macro and take a moment to breathe. Congratulations, you're all done. Now for the fun part, let's test your macro. Return to your inbox and make sure you're in a conversation within the workspace you applied your macro to. Click on your macro to get it going. You'll see the options you set up for selecting a customer, deciding which payment to refund given the properties presented to help you choose, and of course selecting what amount of refund is applicable for the scenario. Remember, just as before, that these refunds are real, so best to test them in a sandbox using test credit cards. After the Stripe API thinks for a moment, you'll see your confirmation message that the refund was processed successfully. Now that we've seen the macro run, there is one improvement we can make. Go back to your macro to edit it. What we want to do is add some basic error handling to catch cases when the refund fails to process. We do this by adding a branch by condition node before the Apply Actions node. Select a branch by checking if the refund status variable contains the phrase succeeded. This is the successful confirmation status returned by the API. If the return status is not equal to succeeded, we should notify front teammates that the refund did not succeed. In the failure case branch, write a comment to teammates telling them the refund did not process. Click Done, and then save your macro. Return to your inbox to test the new flow with error handling included. Click your macro, then select a customer and charge that you have already fully refunded. Trying to refund this charge again should result in an error from the API. Let's give this a shot. Excellent. Now we see a comment stating that the refund failed to process. Beforehand, the comment would have posted with a blank status, which is not as helpful. Our colleagues will be much happier. We hope this tutorial has been useful for you to get up and running with front connectors. We'll catch you next time. Adios.